I used to work at Pizza Hut when I was in high school. I have a lot of bizarre stories from working there, but this is the one that scared me the most. My Pizza Hut was the kind where you could only pick up the food, and there was also a wall between the storefront and the kitchen, so if you were in the front of the store, you were pretty much on your own. The store itself was located in a kind of out-of-the-way, dead shopping center. Oh, and it was Las Vegas. And that should tell you a lot about the level of our clientele. For some reason, I always got stuck on the late shift despite being in high school. So on most weeknights, by 10 at night it would just be me and one other cook in the store twiddling our thumbs. I would hang out at the front, and the cook usually was way at the back of the store out of earshot. One night, I was hanging out behind the counter, and I saw this guy walk past. I didn't think much of it and just went back to doing nothing while waiting for my shift to end. Then the door to the store opened. I look up and I realize it's the same guy who just went by. He's tall, but also skeletally thin, and there's something just not right about his eyes. But despite him putting me on edge, I get up, greet him, and ask him what he'd like to order. Nothing. He just stands there in front of me, staring up at the ceiling and muttering to himself. I was only 17 and for the most part a good kid, despite living in Sin City, so I didn't really know what to make of it. Now, I would probably just chalk it up to drugs. Anyway, he's still standing there, vacant of expression, and muttering in what sounds like tongues. Then he abruptly spins around and just walks back out of the store without even acknowledging that I exist. At this point I'm unnerved, but I just shake it off and sit back down. It's getting toward the end of my shift, and I'm counting down the minutes, when I realize somebody has just walked back into the store. I look up, and it's the same guy. Same creepy eyes, only this time, he's holding up a phone to his ear. He's muttering unintelligibly, so I realize he's not talking to anyone, and worse, he's staring right at me, super intense and unblinking. At this point, I'm starting to get frightened. He just keeps looking at me, and so I try to be polite and ask if I can help him. He starts walking towards the counter, still staring at me. Then suddenly he asks in a perfectly normal voice if his order is ready. I'm mentally going, what the fuck at this point, and I'm not sure how to answer. So I go with the truth, and I tentatively point out to him that he didn't order anything when he was first in the store. He gets this bug-eyed look on his face and lunges toward the counter. I jump back at this point and my heart is pounding, because this guy is obviously not sane. I'm also afraid that he's going to pull out a knife or something and stab me. Then, just as abruptly as he lunged, he yells, "God damn it!" and looks super confused and upset, like he's about to cry, and just puts his head in his hands and starts pulling at his hair. I start to feel slightly bad at this point, and I ask him nicely and calmly as I can if maybe he wants to order something now. His head snaps back up. His expression is now completely blank, and he looks totally deranged. I'm holding totally still because I'm afraid moving will set him off. Then, thankfully, the door to the store opens, and a huge man walks in. He looks at this guy kind of confused, realizing that something's not right with him. The crazy guy looks at him, and looks back at me. He then starts backing up until he's at the door. He starts walking towards the edge of the storefront, looking at me the whole time, and then he just goes past the edge of the store and is gone. The guy who walked in looks at me and asks what the hell was that. I just look back and tell him I have no idea and I think the guy was crazy. I try to shake it off, but I'm totally on edge for the rest of my shift. When I clocked out that night, I made one of the drivers walk out with me. Then I jumped into my car and just got the hell out of there. I never saw that dude again, but it was a weird experience and pretty unnerving. I'm not sure what he would have done if that guy hadn't walked in when he did. I attend a college that's located in one of the poorest cities in Northern California. The campus is relatively safe since the school employs its own Department of Public Safety, but after the sun sets, it's usually a good call to remain indoors because that's when the townies come out and they tend to wander onto campus. About 2 years ago, I was living in an apartment complex on the main part of the campus and I still didn't have a car yet. It was the end of the fall semester, and I was the last person in my apartment of 3 girls to finish taking finals, so I was home alone since my roommates had already gone home for the winter break. I got back from taking my last exam and followed my usual routine of dejectedly collapsing into a bed to cry and sleep off the effects of pulling an all-nighter. When I finally woke up, it was already past 10 p.m. and I was starving. Unfortunately, the student grocery store and cafeteria were closed for the day, and I had nothing in the apartment to eat and no car to get food elsewhere. I was woefully poking around the fridge in hopes that I would find something substantial to tide me over until morning, when I noticed a Domino's coupon that someone had stuck to the freezer. My stomach's pathetic cries for sustenance had been answered. I quickly decided that there was no shame in ordering a whole pizza for myself, because 1, I was ravenous, and 2, the completion of finals demanded some sort of celebration, and 3, if anyone happened to ask, I was going to lie and say I was sharing it with a friend or something along those lines. Anyway, I eagerly order up my feast for 1 and provide the cashier with my address, apartment, and cell number. I typically never give out my number to anyone, but I had ordered delivery from Domino's in the past, and I knew they needed my number to call me once they were outside, because the drivers always got lost navigating through campus. About 20 minutes later, I got the call. My food was here. For reference, it was now close to midnight, and the campus was pretty much dead since most students had gone home. The driver told me he was parked in front of a dorm building that was right across the street from my apartment. I hustled out of my apartment and was going down the stairs when I spotted the delivery guy waiting outside of his car with my pizza. At this point, my sense of caution kicked in, and I slowed my pace as my brain took in the fact that there were no other students out, the lighting was bad, and I was essentially walking up to a stranger in his car that still had its engine running. As I neared the bottom of the steps, I silently hoped he would cross the street and approach me, so that I wouldn't have to get near the car. Of course, that didn't happen. I made my way across the street and was finally able to get a good look at him. He was a relatively short Hispanic guy, maybe 5'7" or 5'9", in his early 20s, and my nerves were getting bombarded by the creeper vibes he was giving off. I can only compare it to the vibe that you get when you're out clubbing, and you suddenly spot the guy lurking in the crowd sporting the slicked back ponytail, sunglasses, oversized shirt, and sagged pants combo who just happens to be headed in your direction. I did my best to appear calm and keep the mood light and friendly. He made some comments about how late it was and how no one was around, but I just signed the receipt as quickly as possible, gave him my thanks and an awkward smile, and hightailed it out of there as soon as he handed me my food. I could feel him watching me as I climbed the stairs back to my place. Once I got back into my apartment, I locked and chained the door and sat down on the living room couch to calm myself. After a few moments, I shrugged off the situation and reasoned it was just my paranoia and overactive imagination acting up again. I had turned on the TV and was about to take my first bite of pizza when I got a text from an unknown number. It just read, "You're hella sexy." I connected the dots and matched the text number to the call I had received earlier from the pizza delivery guy. My initial reaction, of course, was shock, since nothing like this had ever happened to me before. But that eventually melted away into laughter and disbelief when I considered my appearance at the time. Like I had mentioned earlier, I had just woken up from my nap after taking the last of my finals. I was wearing a pair of raggedy sweatpants and a loose sweatshirt, my hair was nappy and tied up in a messy ponytail, and my face was probably greasier than the pizza I was eating. And to top it all off, I had my glasses on. Definitely not a pretty picture, much less anything that could even come close to resembling hella sexy. The next morning I got a call from my boyfriend John, and I casually told him about the events that had transpired the previous evening. After sheepishly trying to defend my actions on the basis of poor judgment caused by extreme hunger and promising never to do that type of thing again, John convinced me that I should report it to the campus police as a precautionary measure. I gave them a call and an officer stopped by my apartment a few hours later. I relayed my story, he took some pictures of the text message and wrote down the dude's phone number. The officer then told me he could contact the Domino's if I wanted him to, but that it would most likely result in the guy's termination. I was still relatively unfazed by the whole situation, and I told the officer that I just wanted to make sure this creep never did this to any other girls on campus, but at the same time I didn't want him to lose his job. The officer then started asking me questions about how I felt during my encounter. questions along the lines of, do you feel threatened by this man? Do you feel safe in your apartment with the knowledge that he has both your phone number and your exact address? If I wasn't scared before, I definitely was now, and during the course of my questioning, I had broken out into a cold sweat, and my traitorous imagination began conjuring up all sorts of dastardly situations that ended in my untimely demise. Obviously, I ended up giving the officer the go-ahead to pursue my case and contact Domino's. About a month later, while I was at home celebrating the holidays, I got a call from my boyfriend. I had left him the keys to my apartment so that he could go store his bike there and crash in my room while I was away. He told me that he had stopped by my place, but that he couldn't get in because the keys weren't working. He also said that it looked like someone had broken in because there was some glass on the floor and a wooden board across my living room window. I was pretty upset because this was my first time hearing about it, so I called the school the next day to figure out what the hell happened. Housing transferred my call to the public safety department, and the officer I spoke with was only able to tell me that, according to their records, a maintenance worker had called them 2 days after I had headed home to report my broken window. Public safety had responded by boarding up the window and changing the lock when they noticed it had been tampered with. I convinced the officer to let my boyfriend into the apartment so he could check if anything was stolen, and thankfully, nothing was. My gut tells me that it was the pizza delivery man who did it. It was him who tried to pick my lock and then break my window. It scares me even more now when I consider the fact that nothing had been stolen. My flat-screen TV was right by the window that had been broken, and my boyfriend's fancy road bike was sitting right there in the living room. Why didn't he steal anything? Does that mean his intentions were to break in and get his revenge on me, the girl that had cost him his job? Would this still have happened if I had not given the officer permission to pursue the case? I try not to spend too much time speculating about what his true intentions were, but when I do, it still makes my heart race when I think about what could have happened if I had still been in my apartment at the time. I took a third job delivering pizzas in Chicago when I was 25. I had an order in one of these big fancy condominiums downtown. When you deliver to these buildings, you have to check in at the front desk, where they usually call the resident to confirm the delivery. Once I was cleared to go up, this young guy saunters up to the front desk from behind the crowds in the lobby. This was a Friday evening, and the lobby was abuzz with people ready for a night on the town. This guy was dressed kind of business casual, and the only thing that made him really stand out was that he was wearing one of those gaudy visors that you might associate with college frat guys. He jokingly says to me,
"Hey, that's my pizza. I'll take it."
To which I respond, "Fuck off, pal." I had heard some take or another of this joke before. It's especially common in business lobbies like this one, and typically that would be the end of it, and we'd never see each other again. But the tone of my voice, or my crude choice of words, or any one aspect of the way I conducted myself, seemed to have struck a nerve with the fellow. As I began to walk towards the elevator doors, he stopped me, and says with a grave tone,
"You think you can talk to me that way? Do you know who I am?"
Is this still a joke? I thought to myself. What's going on here? I have several more pizzas waiting in my car, and if I don't deliver this one and get back to the mall parking lot in front of the building within 5 minutes, the valet will have my car towed. I decide to ignore the man and press forward, but he persisted after me, babbling about what he does to people like me. He followed me onto the elevator, crowded with other tenants. I thought this would make him shut up, but he only became more agitated.
"I know what kind of person you are,"
he said to me, his eyes gleaming with hate. He pushed his face into mine, and allowed me my first good look at him. He was handsome, with fair skin, brown hair, and blue eyes. He was a young and virile white guy, probably from somewhere in Northbrook or Evanston or Lake Forest. If you've ever been stuck on a crowded elevator with an agitated lunatic, you know that tensions quickly rise once the collective group becomes privy to the fact that the lunatic is not in fact joking when he says,
"I can kill you, you know. I can have you killed, or I can do it myself."
"I'll call the authorities if you keep this up," I said. "You think these nice people want to listen to your threats of violence?" My floor was the first stop, and him and I were the only ones to exit. I walked down to the empty hall, pizza in hand, and find the apartment number. All the while, this man is walking behind me and mumbling,
"You fuck. You're nothing to me. I hate your kind."
I knock on the door and a middle-aged man answers. I tell him the price and give him the pizza. He gives me my pay and motions to the crazy guy. "So, you let your friends come with you?" "No, sir. I've never met him before. He's been following me up here. I think he lives in the building."
"I do live here, and you're a worthless fuck who shouldn't be here."
The man with the pizza says, "Can't you see you're harassing him? He's only doing his job. Why don't you just leave him alone?" I thank the man and head back toward the elevator. This time, there's only one other man on the elevator. To break the tension of this guy's jabbering threats, I ask him what he does for a living. "You live in this nice building, right? You're young. Where do you work?" "At the Merc," he says. "The Chicago Mercantile Exchange." Visions of him on the busy trading floor shouting and signaling about commodities and futures flashed in my head. It made sense now. When we reach the lobby, he stays on the elevator, presumably to go to his apartment. I walk across the lobby with the other man on the elevator. On the way out the door, I say to him, "Typical Wall Street behavior, huh?" "Sure enough," he says. This happened a few years back, when I was 12 or 13 years old. I'm from the Philippines. It was a Sunday afternoon at probably 5 to 6 o'clock, and I was at home with my dad. My mom had left to buy groceries about 30 minutes ago using our one car. As I was watching videos on YouTube, the doorbell suddenly rang. It rang quite a few times until I'd finally had enough of it. That's when I knew that I had to open it. Knowing that my dad was probably sleeping in the other room, I reluctantly went downstairs to open the door. The thing is, I've dreaded opening the front door for people ever since my grandpa scolded me for opening the door to the mailman for this house. He lectured me about how dangerous it could be, like I could be kidnapped or something. With that thought, I climbed on the sofa, which was 3 feet away from the front door, and pulled the curtains to see who was ringing the doorbell. Note that the window I looked through was surrounded by a tall fence 4 or 5 feet away, so I felt perfectly safe, and I found it convenient later once I talked to him. He had a dark cap on and a blue jumper. He looked pretty normal to me, but we weren't expecting anyone on a quiet Sunday. I asked him what his business was, and he replied that he was supposed to deliver a pizza to my address. Excited and a bit confused, thinking that my dad had secretly ordered pizza for us, I told him to wait while I got my dad. I climbed upstairs to my parents' room and saw my dad sleeping. I woke him up and asked him if he ordered pizza, and he replied in a daze that he didn't. Disappointed, I go back downstairs to break the news to the delivery guy who probably got the wrong address. But when I got back to the window, he was gone. Since I was pretty young back then, I didn't think much of it until now. Today I'm certain, and even my mom agrees when I told her the story a few years later, that I was almost kidnapped. One, it was quiet outside and I left my bedroom window open, but I didn't hear a motorcycle revving near the house, nor did I hear it when he left. 2, he left just like that, even though I specifically told him to wait. I didn't say that we didn't order pizza. 3, I didn't see a logo of the pizza place he was supposed to be working for. The strange thing was that we only had 2 that were near us, and they had a distinctive red color. 4, I didn't see a motorcycle near him, which was extremely odd. My mom's theory was that the guy probably thought I was at home alone because our single car was gone, and my dad rarely got out of the house since he was unemployed back then. What probably got him to leave was that I told him to wait for me to get my dad. If not for my grandpa scolding me, I would have answered the door, and probably not be here writing this for you guys. Hey guys, what's up? It's Blue Spooky here. I just wanted to thank you all for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. We're pretty close to coming up on 500 subscribers now, so I'm super excited about that. Gonna try to get back on schedule here pretty soon. And what better way than to start off with this special scary pizza delivery stories video. If you guys like the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have any constructive criticism or feedback, please leave it in the comments below because I'm always trying to improve and I'd really like to know what I can do better for you guys. If you have any stories that you'd like me to read or your own personal stories that you'd like to send in, I have links to all my social media in the description below so you guys can check those out. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great day.